The first thing Key saw when the door hissed open wasn't treasure. It was a cage, a living one. Inside, something moved, not in rage, not in hunger, but in the kind of pain that makes bones scream. It pressed its face against the pulsating membrane of the biocage. Its eyes, bloodlit, intelligent, primal, met hers, and something passed between them. Then the alarm blared. Not hers. The whole ship shook as an external force tore through the hull like paper. A shockwave of gravity inversion slammed Key against the wall. Her visor cracked. She blinked, blood from her eye. The sound of screaming wasn't human. Through the cracked viewport she caught a glimpse, a ship sleek spined. Ugly in the way living weapons are, latched onto hers like a leech. Boarding lines punctured the outer shell. Dull thuds echoed down the corridors. Air pressure fluctuated. The emergency system flickered uselessly. Then silence, and then they came, Crafter. They didn't walk. They crawled on fused limbs, plated in bone and metal, eyes glowing blue with neural override tech. One leapt through the breach, landing inches from Key's face. It hissed something she didn't understand, then slammed its fist into her chest. Her last coherent thought before the neurospike drilled into her neck was, wrong ship. Wrong job, wrong nightmare. She woke to pain, not the clean kind, the kind that buzzed like insects in the spine. She couldn't move, couldn't blink, but she could see. And what she saw tore something in her. Her crew, those bastards she didn't even like, didn't even trust, were strung up on biomech rigs, limbs removed. Spines opened. One of them, Griggs, the engineer who had once patched her suit mid-battle with nothing but curse words. And tape was being refitted into something else, a harvesting unit. Alive, sobbing, his eyes met hers. They were full of apology. And horror. He mouthed something, run, but her legs didn't answer. Neither did her mouth. She was shackled, neural override. High-tier Crafter tech, meant for turning prisoners into blank slates. Two of the aliens dragged her through the corridor. One scanned her biometrics with a hand device made of bone and wire. The other hissed to its superior, resistant cortex. Military strain, useful. Key couldn't even spit in their face. Her mind was screaming, clawing at the wall of her own skull, but her body was meat now. Prey on the conveyor belt. They stopped in front of a sealed chamber. And the moment the doors opened, the air changed. It wasn't the pressure or the temperature. It was the feeling. Something inside hated everything. Hated the cage, hated the light, hated being alive. And when Key saw it again, it wasn't through the lens of a thief. It was a mirror. The creature, 7 feet tall, covered in ridged black skin like armored grief, snarled from behind a membrane field. Tubes ran into its back. Injectors stabbed its flesh in intervals. Its mouth was partially fused, but its eyes were wide awake. And they were looking straight at her, the Crafter leader, larger than the rest. Adorned with fungal cables and mechanical arms, approached the cage and spoke in its native clicks. This one failed integration. Its mind rejected obedience. It cannot be repurposed. We will extract its biomass instead. Key felt something shift in her, not pity, recognition. The neuroshackles buzzed, system update. For a second, everything glitched. Lights flickered, biosignals staggered. One of the Crafter jolted as its implant sparked. And in that heartbeat of error, Key moved, not much. Just enough. Her thumb reached the side of her belt, barely touching the edge of her old disruptor pin still jammed in the lining. It had one charge left, enough for a small blast, enough to destabilize a nearby field. Not a weapon, a whisper. She used it. The field on the cage shimmered. Not a full shutdown, just a flicker, just enough for the creature to feel the weakness. It didn't lunge, it didn't scream. It looked at her again. And Key, blood still running from her mouth, her body half paralyzed, said one word. Not out loud, just in her mind, but she knew it heard. Me too. The lights exploded. Alarms screamed. A crafter slammed its claws into the control panel, but the override was gone. The neural net failed, the cage dissolved, and the thing inside stepped out. Not with a roar, with silence. It moved like a blade forged from vengeance. The first alien never saw the claw until its throat split open. The second tried to run, but was slammed against the wall with a sound like wet wood snapping. The leader turned, and that was its last mistake. Blood black, acidic. Alien splashed across Key's face as the creature tore through the room. She collapsed to her knees, gasping. Her muscles returned slowly, like burnt wires sparking back to life. The creature stood over her, breathing, watching. She didn't flinch. It didn't kill her, it just leaned down. One hand, massive, clawed, reached out and touched her forehead. Not a threat, a bond, a silent pact of rage. Key stood, wiping blood from her eyes. She looked down the corridor, where more of the crafter waited. The creature growled once, a low vibration of war. She nodded, and together, without a word, they began to move. The slaughter would begin before dawn. Key Vorn did not believe in luck. Especially not hers. She had passed the point of believing in redemption years ago, around the time she watched herself gun down a cluster of unarmed colonists on Drax 7, her visor screen reading confirmed hostiles while their faces read only confusion and terror. The order had come from the high command of the Star Union. And she had followed it. That was the last time Key obeyed anything. She was in her mid-30s now, though time meant little in deep space. Her body bore the enhancements of war, genotyped muscle clusters, Neuralink reflex cores, and a scar beneath her jaw where an emotion dampener implant used to be. She had torn that out with a scalpel, one nerve at a time, in a motel orbiting a dead moon. Since then she had lived alone, drifted between systems, hunted ships not for profit, but for the things hidden in their holds, things born from gene vats, raised in cages, sold across galaxies. It wasn't about freeing them. She just wanted to see something that still fought the leash. Her current ship, the Vagrant's Dagger Asterisk, was more scar than machine. The outer hull was scorched in 3 colors, and its AI barely functioned without stuttering. Key kept most of its systems offline by design. Trust didn't extend to circuits. Only the nav core stayed active, and the voice. It didn't speak unless prompted. She preferred it that way. Yet today, before she left for the derelict hauler flagged by a black market beacon near the Asthenos Rift, the AI had spoken. A glitch, perhaps. Or something deeper. Coordinates locked. Do you require a parting statement? She had paused. Just for a breath, then muttered, if I don't come back, don't remember me. The voice didn't answer. She liked that. Key's past was not a story she told. But sometimes, in the silence between hyperspace jumps, fragments clawed back into her mind like static. The training, the simulations, the slaughter, the moment she realized she was just another cog in a machine that ate lives and printed metals. When she deserted, she didn't run out of guilt. She ran out of numbness. Now, years later, she still carried a gun, still fought. But the target had shifted. No more orders, no more flags. Just a single purpose. Find something, anything, that reminded her what being human used to feel like. That's why she took the job, a coded message, short, broken, intercepted on a dying channel from a pirate relay near the edge of the Titan Belt. Subject from Hela Project, active. Contained for transfer. 90K credits, black market ready. Project Hela. She hadn't heard that name in over a decade. Officially, it didn't exist, just whispers in war rooms. A hybrid bioweapon initiative, developed by fringe geneticists under the Star Union's Biological Warfare Division. The idea was to splice feral instinct with programmable obedience. It had failed. All subjects were presumed terminated. So why was one alive? Why had someone caged it instead of incinerating it? Key didn't care about the credits. She didn't even care about the risk. She just wanted to see it. Whatever it was. Because if something had resisted the programming long enough to survive, maybe she wasn't alone in her kind of rage. She moved through her ship with surgical calm. Each movement deliberate, measured, the way a person moves when every breath is accounted for. Her weapons were old, reliable, a carbon-plated pulse rifle worn at the grip from years of hard kills. A knife coated in ceramic dust, sharp enough to separate bone from command chip. She carried no emblem, no insignia, just a strip of gray cloth wrapped around her wrist, the last thing she kept from her old squad, all of whom had died thinking she was a traitor. She didn't bother to correct them. As her shuttle detached from the vagrant's dagger asterisk, the pirate hauler loomed in front of her, half sunken in the gravity distortion of the rift. Broken but not abandoned, someone was still there. Or something. Inside, Key's HUD blinked with trace signals. Movement, power surges, a faint signature like an artificial heartbeat. The ship wasn't completely dead, but it wasn't alive either. The airlock groaned when she docked. She stepped through without hesitation. Dust, blood, claw marks on the walls, a silence too loud to ignore. Her pulse didn't change, only her grip on the rifle did. She was trained to detect traps, to read rooms, to map danger before it moved. But nothing prepared her for what she would find in the heart of that ship. Not just blood, not just death, but a cage, a biocage. And inside it, the last child of Hela. As she stood in front of it, watching the thing breathe in rage, in memory. In defiance, Key felt something shift, not fear, not pity. Recognition. This thing had been made to obey, programmed to serve. Conditioned to kneel, and it had survived. That was enough. That was asterisk everything asterisk. And as the alarms began to scream across the ship, and alien slavers descended from the rift, ripping her mission into shards of chaos, Key did not think about escape. She did not think about credits. She thought about that thing in the cage. And about what it meant to break the chain together. The Crafter vessel was a graveyard stitched to a spine. Every corridor pulsed faintly, the walls a hybrid of decomposed metal and grown tissue, veined with cables that squirmed when touched. The lights overhead flickered in irregular rhythms, casting long shadows that never stayed still. The smell in the air wasn't rot, it was worse. It was the artificial sweetness of sterile decay. As if the ship itself had forgotten which parts were machine and which had once been alive. Key had seen warships, slaver ships, even butcher transports. But this was designed by something that didn't just want to control. It wanted to redefine asterisk life. She moved silently, pulse steady, eyes sweeping for exits, traps, or movement. Her cuffs glowed with suppressor fields, tight to the bone. Every time she flexed her wrist, a tiny jolt of pain corrected her. The Crafter didn't waste power on full paralysis. They preferred discipline through discomfort, as the guards pushed her deeper into the ship. The architecture shifted, less steel, more bone. Carvings etched into the walls, runes or warnings, depicted skeletal figures kneeling before faceless giants. Key didn't flinch. She had already died once. Everything after was borrowed time. They descended into the lower decks. The air thickened. And that's when she heard it. A voice rasped, old, unafraid. Another predator in chains, it said. She turned her head subtly. One cell, sealed in tangled biomesh, held a creature no larger than a child. Its skin was gray, marked with lesions, and its eyes glowed faintly green. It looked broken, spine twisted, ribs exposed from old surgery. But it watched her with the patience of something that had survived too long to be surprised. "You think you're the hunter," the thing said, but they'll make you fold your spine into a noose and hang yourself. From your own memories. One of the guards slammed the bars with the butt of his weapon, but the creature didn't flinch. It just smiled, a gesture so full of exhausted truth that Key had to look away. Further down the corridor, a human body hung from the ceiling, wired into the overhead network, suspended by spinal conduits. The eyes were still open, the mouth stitched shut. They passed beneath it in silence. Key's boots left faint prints on the membrane-like floor. With every step, her mind screamed for a plan. Her muscles burned with containment pressure. Her nanolinks had been jammed. She had no weapons. No escape route, but she had her mind, and they hadn't broken that. Not yet. One of the Crafter technicians stepped forward as they reached a heavily reinforced door. It examined her with a scanning lens that rotated like an insect's eye. A low chime echoed as data poured into its translator. Neural irregularity, it hissed to the others. Subject has resistance strain. Unknown origin. Another voice, colder, less curious, responded, genetic deviation. Possible military grade. Process through gen taming chamber 3. Key's lips curled. Gen taming, that meant surgical reconditioning. The last step before turning soldiers into docile husks. She'd seen it done. She'd helped do it, not again. The doors ahead opened with a wet hiss, revealing a chamber sealed in amber light. Inside was the cage, but not just any cage. This one asterisk breathed asterisk. A dome of living tissue, reinforced by adaptive alloys, pulsed with its own heartbeat. Tubes ran in and out, carrying fluid that shimmered with bioluminescence. Inside, crouched in a fetal coil of tension, was something alive and wrong and beautiful. Specimen 09. The rumors had described it as a myth. A failed weapon, a war crime, but Key saw it now not just with her eyes. With something deeper. The creature was massive, 7 feet at least, its limbs elongated, shoulders spine like reef coral. Its skin a dark amalgam of scales and scars. Tubes pierced its back like roots feeding off its pain. But its face, what passed for one, was disturbingly humanoid. Not in structure, in expression, it felt asterisk, not rage. Not mindless hunger, it felt grief, contained, controlled. Coiled like a spring that had forgotten how to break. Key met its gaze through the cage membrane, and for one fraction of a breath, the ship forgot to hum. Then chaos, a siren wailed, lights dimmed, a shockwave rolled through the chamber, an internal systems failure. Sparks burst from the overhead conduits, panels exploded in static bursts. The guards reacted instantly. One reached for his neural override. Too late, the chamber's stasis field flickered, and then the door sealed shut. Emergency lockdown, isolation protocol, Key and the specimen were locked inside. Together, no weapons, no exits, no commands, just two beings cut open by a system collapse exposed to each other. A gas hissed from the ceiling, neutralizer mist, designed to strip bioelectric shielding. A side effect, forced emotional bleed. Her skin prickled as her mental barriers collapsed. Memories surged, old wounds reopened, the boy on Drax 7. His face, her gun, the order in her ear, the scream she never heard. The silence she still carried, and then asterisk another memory. But not hers, a vision of metal needles, cold restraint. The sensation of language being ripped from the throat. Hands, so many hands, shaping, slicing, whispering, lying. Key fell to her knees. So did the creature. They were breathing each other's nightmares. No language, no need, just shared ruin. The cage flickered again. For a moment there was nothing between them, and in that moment the beast rose. It didn't charge, it stepped forward slowly, deliberately. Key stood trembling but steady. No fight, no threat. Just a question unspoken. Are you mine, or are you like me? And for the first time since she entered that cursed ship. Key did something she hadn't done in years. She reached out. Not for a weapon, but for a connection. The silence after the collapse of the stasis field wasn't peaceful. It was loaded, thick with the kind of tension that comes before a hunt, before blood is drawn. Key stood in the center of the sealed chamber, still breathing the shared psychic fog from the neutralizer mist. Her skin ached, her pulse was irregular, but her eyes didn't look away from the creature before her. And the creature didn't kill her. It could have. Its claws were longer than her forearm, its mass doubled hers. And the membrane field had collapsed completely. All systems, restraints, suppressors, fail-safes, gone. It was free, unleashed, fully functional. It took a step toward her. She didn't move. Another step, still nothing. It lowered its head slightly like it was listening. Not to her voice, to something else, something beneath her flesh. Her neural frequency. Key felt it in her spine, a humming resonance. A low vibration that didn't belong to the ship. It came from the creature. Or rather between them. Somewhere in the chaos, their minds had synced, not in words or thoughts, but in damage. She didn't command it, it didn't obey. They simply understood. She lifted her wrist, fingers twitching against scar tissue that ran down the back of her hand. The implant was old, damaged, a leftover from her time in the Union, a covert field-grade Neuralink node buried just beneath the skin, connected to tactical channels long since defunct. But it still worked. She accessed the old protocols, not to call backup, not to signal allies, but to speak the only language the ship still listened to, code fragments. Biolock decay keys, emergency overrides. Her fingers danced in pattern, mimicking the forgotten Union cadence. A buried part of her whispered that she was betraying herself, using tools from the past she'd sworn to bury. But this wasn't about escape anymore. This was about war. She sent the signal. All across the Crafter vessel, biolocks began to fail. Doors groaned. Containment pods cracked open. And somewhere deep in the underdeck, a red warning pulse stuttered into life. One floor above, in the maintenance corridors, a Crafter patrol paused mid-step. Then one of them screamed. The first kill wasn't loud. It was surgical, a blur of shadow, a wet tearing sound, and then nothing. No gunfire, no footsteps, just a smear of black across the wall. Key emerged moments later from the darkness. Her face was lit only by the flickering glow of dying wall panels. Behind her, the creature moved like a thought, soundless, precise, terrifying. Blood dripped from its claws, not hers, not yet. Another patrol rounded the corner, 3 Crafter, armed with subdermal blade gauntlets and neuroflash grenades. They spotted her instantly. Human detected, one barked. Severe breach, terminate, but Key didn't raise a weapon. She didn't flinch, she stood still, and then from behind her came the low growl. Not from rage, not hunger, from memory. The Crafter hesitated. They scanned the corridor, their eyes catching on the distortion in the air behind her. The growl grew louder. Key tilted her head slightly. Her voice was calm, cold. Who's the slave now? Then the hallway exploded in motion. The creature moved before the aliens could react. One was pinned against the ceiling, its spine bent in half. The second fired wildly, hitting nothing, before being dragged down the corridor, its scream ending abruptly. The third tried to run, but Key stepped in his path. She didn't strike, she just looked into his eyes, and something in her face made him drop his blade. The beast did the rest. Blood soaked the floor tiles. The lights above them flickered as the ship reacted, confused, slow, blind. Crafter systems were designed around order, prediction, routine. What was happening now was chaos, an unscripted anomaly, the kind no algorithm could contain. And at its center stood a woman once programmed to kill without asking, now killing with purpose. Key moved from corridor to corridor, not as a commander, not as a hero, but as something more dangerous, a ghost with nothing left to lose. She wasn't free yet, but she was no longer owned, and every crafter that fell to the claws of her companion felt the weight of that revelation. As they advanced through the maintenance deck, Key's mind began to drift backwards against her will, to the moment she first pulled the trigger on Drax 7. She'd been 24, a rising star in the Union Tactical Corps. Precise, obedient, efficient, the village was tagged as a rebel node. She received the order through her implant, no visuals. No voice, just numbers, coordinates, execute. She had moved through the settlement like a wraith. Her squad covered the perimeter. She took the shot on a young man, barely 20, standing beside a communications relay. She watched his body hit the ground before she realized he'd been unarmed. No resistance, no threat, just a face twisted in confusion and pain. That face came back to her now, not in dreams, not in guilt, but in the way the creature had looked inside the cage. The same confusion, the same quiet plea, why me? That was the moment Key stopped believing in orders. Stopped believing in the Union. But it wasn't until today, standing ankle-deep in the blood of slavers, beside a being that should have hated her, that she finally understood what she was chasing all these years. Not redemption, not revenge, but agency, control. Not over others, over herself. She whispered it like a vow, like a promise etched in fire, no one owns me now. And from behind her, the biopredator, Specimen 09, let out a low growl that sounded almost like approval. They reached the central spinal deck, where the command nexus pulsed like a brain exposed to air. Crafter reinforcements had begun to mobilize. Automated systems were reactivating. Security turrets unfolded from the ceiling, scanning for targets. Key smiled. The creature crouched beside her, muscles coiled like thunder. Together they prepared for the next wave, and deep in her gut, for the first time in years, Key felt something she'd thought long dead, not rage. Not vengeance, freedom. The ship's core was alive. Not metaphorically, literally. It pulsed like a giant heart. Embedded within a spiraling control nexus made of hybrid bioalloy and synaptic mesh. Tendrils of organic data trailed down from the ceiling, feeding into pulsing nodes that blinked in irregular, almost anxious rhythms. The entire chamber was wired not just to function, but to remember. Key stepped into the chamber first, her boots sloshing through a thin layer of neurogel pooling on the floor. It smelled like iron and grief. Behind her, Specimen 09 moved like a shadow pressed into flesh, silent but charged with something unstable. This was the command deck of the crafter vessel. The heart, the hive, the mind, and it was about to crack. At the center stood a pillar, a tower of spinal cords interwoven with data strands, flickering with stored memory fragments. It took Key a moment to realize what she was seeing. Every slave who had died on the ship, every failed experiment, had been absorbed into this network. Not just physically, psychically, their neural imprints had been archived, manipulated, and used to feed the next generation of creations. Including the one standing beside her, she approached the control console. The interface wasn't a keyboard or touchpad. It was a halo of biotic resonance. A ring of thought-linked sequences, waiting to be accessed by someone compatible. Key's hand hovered above it. Her old neural implant twitched, and the console responded like a dog recognizing a long-lost scent. Data surged up through the floor and into her mind. Not in words, images, feelings, screams with no mouths. And then **A face, a child, mixed ancestry, human, partially crafter, partially something else, male or female, she couldn't tell. The image shimmered in and out, like a candle in vacuum. But what held Key's breath wasn't its appearance. It was the ** eyes. She'd seen them before, in the cage, behind the rage. Behind the silence, Specimen 09, the data screamed at her. Voice overlays, medical logs, command directives all collided inside her skull. Subject born from 11 spliced genome templates. Emotion retention error, memories not wiped. Residual empathy detected, procedure failed. Do not delete, observe for alternative application. Key stumbled back. The realization dropped like a blade through her spine. Specimen 09 wasn't bred for war. It was bred from asterisk pain. The pain of hundreds, maybe thousands of enslaved lives, distilled into a single being. It wasn't a predator, it was memory, memory twisted into flesh. Key turned slowly. Specimen 09 was staring at the console, its breathing ragged. Its claws flexed, twitching. A low-frequency hum began to rise from its chest, subsonic at first, then building into a vibration that resonated through the room. The control tower shivered. The floor cracked beneath their feet. Sparks erupted from the ceiling. Its broadcasting, Key realized. Raw emotion, unfiltered grief. The ship couldn't handle it. Neither could she. Across the control matrix, two choices emerged. A branching path written in biocode, waiting for Key's command. Option 1 * release all containment sectors. Open every cell. Let every specimen out. Bioweapons, failed hybrids, cognitive anomalies. Let them run free. Burn the ship from the inside. Option 2 * target command relay. Upload annihilation protocol to the bridge. Kill the Crafter Alpha, cut off the head, leave the rest caged. Key's fists clenched. She glanced at Specimen 09. It was vibrating now, its body tense and trembling. The frequency in the air had risen to a pitch that cracked the lights above. Panels were crumbling. One more moment and it would scream, and the whole ship would shatter. She stepped toward it. "Stop," she said softly. It didn't hear her. Or maybe it couldn't. She reached up, laid her palm gently against its forehead. It froze. No one had touched it that way before, not gently. Not with intention, not with care. "Listen to me," she whispered. "You were made from pain. I was trained to cause it. We're both monsters, maybe, but this—" Her other hand hovered above the console, trembling. "This choice decides what kind." The creature blinked. For the first time there was no growl. No snarl, no violence, only silence. Key looked into its eyes. "We can kill everything on the ship. That's easy. That's what they want us to do, but if we do, what's left of us?" The hum died. She stepped back, lowering her hand from the console. And waited. Specimen 09 looked at her, its expression unreadable but no longer consumed. Then slowly it turned toward the command tower, raised a single claw, and drove it into the primary control junction. Not the release code. Not the weapon cache, the kill switch. A low chime echoed. Power throughout the ship began to fail. The cells remained sealed. The bridge disconnected. Crafter systems began to blink out, one by one. No massacre, no fire, just closure. The control room dimmed as the core powered down. The floor stopped shaking. The pressure in the air lifted. Specimen 09 staggered back, as if it had just aged 10 years in a second. Key caught it before it fell. No words were exchanged. None were needed. She held it like someone holds a wounded soldier, not a weapon. Not an asset, a life, one they refused to let become another entry in someone else's archive. Outside the ship, in the dark belt beyond the stars, the Crafter vessel drifted into silence. Not destroyed, not burning, just finished, and inside, amid the dimming lights and fading echoes of screams that never should have existed, a woman and a creature sat side by side. Not masters, not monsters, just two survivors, and for once neither needed to kill to feel real. The ship was dying, not in flames or fury, but in silence, the kind of stillness that only comes after something sacred, has been desecrated beyond repair. Systems flickered, auto sequences halted mid-cycle, and the low thrum of crafter bioengines began to fade like the heartbeat of a sedated beast. Key stood alone before the terminal, its organic interface still pulsing faintly beneath her palm. The control tower had shut down, but its network core remained responsive, like a creature half asleep, waiting for one last command. She had a choice again, not destruction, not vengeance, but restoration. Her fingers moved with precision, her neural implants still sparking slightly from overload. The console responded slowly, recognizing the signature in her DNA. It was old, buried beneath scars and time, but still there, Union military encryption woven into her cells like a forgotten truth. Lines of alien and human code flickered across the screen, meshing, fusing, unlocking. Secondary protocol, slave containment release sequence engaged. Genetic override verified, execute, she didn't hesitate. The lights dimmed further, then surged, softly, not violently. Across the ship, sealed doors hissed open, cryocapsules unlatched with a quiet pop. Chains released, neuroclamps fell to the floor, the ship exhaled its prisoners. From deep within the lower decks came muffled gasps, footsteps, movement. Survivors, dozens of them, maybe more, emerged from the dark like ghosts returning from exile. Scarred, broken, altered, but alive, Key watched the process unfold in silence. No one called her a savior, no one even looked up. They were too busy remembering how to walk, how to breathe. She didn't want thanks, she just wanted them free. Behind her, Specimen 09 remained where it had been, half-shadowed at the edge of the control chamber. It didn't follow the released prisoners, didn't move at all. It just stood there, like a monument, a relic, a guardian. Key turned toward it. "You're not coming?" she asked, voice low, raw. The creature tilted its head, no sound, no motion. It didn't need to answer, she already knew, this ship had been its prison. Its origin, its graveyard, but also its truth. Every wall here held pieces of it. Every scream, every failure, every betrayal. It wasn't leaving because it had nowhere else to go. And maybe because it had already gone as far as it needed. Key stepped forward, placed a hand gently on its arm, warm, solid, quiet beneath her touch. "You're not a weapon," she whispered, "not anymore." Specimen 09 blinked once, then closed its eyes. She left without fanfare. The escape pod she found was small, barely room for one. She prepped the launch manually, bypassing Crafter security with the last shred of her implant's neural authority. The pod's outer shell groaned as it disconnected from the hull, launching her into the black between systems. She didn't look back. The ship didn't explode, it didn't burn. It just shrank into a speck of darkness, drifting further into the belt. And somewhere inside it, a creature made of memory and rage stood guard over the wreckage of what made it. Key drifted for 2 days before finding refuge. A scavenger ship picked up her distress signal, never asked questions. Only counted credits. She disappeared from sight not long after. The files she carried, the entire data core on Project Hela, were encrypted in 5 layers, each requiring neural confirmation only she could give. She uploaded none of it, sold none of it, never shared the coordinates of the ship. To the rest of the galaxy, it was as if she had vanished. But stories don't need truth to spread. Across smuggler dens and black market channels, a new myth began to circulate. A female pirate who boarded a ghost ship and emerged soaked in blood. A slaver vessel found drifting, its systems fried, its crew missing. A lone pod spotted escaping the ruins, but no identification returned. And the whispers always ended the same way, a woman with dead eyes and a beast behind her, walking through fire and only killing those who thought they owned someone. They called her the Warden of Broken Chains. Some said she was a rogue AI. Others, a survivor of Crafter experiments herself. No one knew her name. Key preferred it that way. Years later, on an unnamed planet in the outer fringes, far beyond map trade lanes, a woman sat beside a shallow pool. Her hair was longer, her armor gone, the scar under her jaw still visible but faded with time. Her rifle rusted near a rock. She hadn't touched it in months. The sky here was orange. The stars came early, and nothing hunted anything unless it was hungry. She sat still, watching the surface of the pool. A small creature, barely the size of a puppy, approached. Thin-limbed, wide-eyed, shimmering faintly with bioluminescence. Native to this planet but curious, it didn't run when it saw her. It didn't fear, it stepped close, sniffed the edge of her boot. Looked up. Key didn't move, she just smiled faintly. Then, almost inaudibly, she whispered to the creature. "You're free." The creature blinked. Key leaned back on her elbows, eyes half closed, listening to the wind pass through alien grass. And so am I. This wasn't a story about humanity defeating aliens. It was a story about one human defeating the parts of herself that had been programmed to obey. Key Vorn didn't save the world. She didn't lead a revolution. She didn't deliver justice to an empire or free an entire species from oppression. But she did save something far rarer. She saved the last flicker of her own humanity, the part buried under years of military conditioning, buried beneath orders she should never have followed, beneath blood she never got to wash off. And that mattered, because sometimes the smallest salvaged piece of a soul is enough to tip the scale. Specimen 09 was never the monster in this story. Not really. It was born from pain, molded from the suffering of those forgotten by history, and repurposed into something that could kill without conscience. But it chose not to. When given the chance to burn the world that made it, it paused. When offered vengeance, it waited. And when Key, another ghost of war, laid a hand on its brow, not to command, not to control, but simply to connect, it chose restraint. That moment was everything, because in that single gesture the myth collapsed. The bioweapon became a reflection of what had been done, of what could still be undone, of the humanity that still lingered, hidden beneath layers of fear, manipulation, and trauma. Key did not tame the beast. She recognized it because she had once been it. There are many stories in the galaxy that celebrate victory, over enemies, over systems, over death. But the rarest victories are the ones won in silence, without glory, without witnesses. The kind fought inside a person's bones, between instinct and conscience, between rage and mercy. That was Key's real war, and she won it not by pulling the trigger, but by choosing not to. She could have destroyed the Crafter ship. She could have unleashed every cage, drowned the halls in blood, watched the architects of suffering die by the hands of the very things they created. But she didn't, because freedom isn't just the absence of chains. It's the refusal to become what those chains tried to make you. So what lesson lingers after the bodies are gone and the stories fade? It's not about weapons, or strength, or vengeance. It's about compassion. That impossible, illogical, inconvenient trait that no war machine has ever replicated. The one thing that doesn't follow code or logic. The one thing you can't install with hardware. Empathy, that's what saved them both, Key and Specimen 09. And if you, reading this in the echo of their story, are still human, then remember this: technology can program weapons, but it can't program mercy. And if you ever find yourself face to face with something the world calls a monster, look deeper. Look into its eyes, because maybe, just maybe, what it needs isn't your fear, isn't your bullet, isn't your command. Maybe what it needs is someone who won't walk away. The galaxy will forget their names. The Union won't speak of her. The crafter won't mourn their dead, and the survivors who stumbled out of that broken ship will remember only shadows and silence. But in the dust between stars, a story will persist. A whisper in pirate dens, a rumor in military files long redacted. A tale told over cheap drinks in backwater planets, of a woman with eyes like ash and a beast beside her who answered only to silence. They say she walked through a ship of death and came out cleaner than when she entered. That she never raised her gun unless the person in front of her held a chain. That she spared even when she could have destroyed. That she was human, truly human, in the only way that matters. By choosing not to be a monster, and somewhere far from maps and markets, on a planet no one charts, she lives quietly. She plants seeds. She watches small creatures crawl toward her without fear. She listens to wind instead of commands. She's not healed. Some wounds never close, but she no longer wakes up wishing she were someone else. Because for the first time in a long, long while, she respects the person staring back at her. Not because she fought, not because she survived, but because when everything in her screamed to burn it all down, she didn't. And maybe that's enough. Final words, left unsent in a data core key buried beneath that orange sky asterisk, maybe I am a killer. Maybe I can never undo that, but this time I didn't kill. I held back, I let something live, and in doing that, I let a part of myself live too.